Thank you very much again. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be awarded this award here in DPRI. I'm going, in France actually, we speak a lot about the debt, and our government was dismissed last Wednesday because he was trying to reduce the debt of the country, and personally I have a very heavy debt, not financial, even though, but a debt to all what I learned from Japanese colleagues and working with them since about 40 years. So what I'm going to do as a kind of thank, and I'm not going to reimburse the debt, but just to thank you, I will first recall a short history of this cooperation along the 4 last decades. And after that, I will also address a more scientific topic, which has been for me 4 decades long after the Mexico City earthquake in 1985, with some strange observation, and I have been looking for signs of possible interaction between buildings and ground motion at the city scale, which I call site-city interaction. So I will present that in a second part, and the last brick in this long quest was done during the stay I made here in spring 2023, invited by Professor Kawase, and I could take advantage of the wonderful Japanese data to look for a proof of this site-city interaction. I don't know if you will be convinced, but let's discuss. I already told about this structure in 2 main parts for my talk today, and I will maybe I can take this. Yeah. I will relate my experience of exchange with Japan. The first one was in the early mid-80s, and then we had continuous relationship. We had through the working group on effect of surface geology, through the development of test sites. There were French-Japanese exchanges with small workshops on different topics. I learned a lot from Japanese seismologists on what has been done to use the seismic noise, microtremors and microseism, and also the latest, after the end of the 90s, the KNet and KICnet network was installed and recorded many data which were a gold mine for many researchers. So I'm going to have a quick overview of what I could do with that. So the starting point were exchanges with Japan through the US. And my first Japanese researcher that I knew was Keiji Aki, because he was a supervisor of my supervisor, Michel Bouchon. And I could meet him in 82 he was still at MIT, and later in 84 at USC. And in the same decade also, during a stay I made in California, I could exchange through Brian Tucker that you see in the center. I could exchange with Kazuyoshi Kudo, with Kojiro Irikura, and also with Hiroshi Kawase. So, as you can see, I call them the the 4 Ks, Keiti Aki, Kudo, Kojiro, and Hiroshi Kawase. And my first trip to Japan was on the occasion of the World Conference on Earthquake Engineering in 1988. So you have a few pictures that were given to me last year by Professor Kudo. And at that time, so we were working on site effects, and there was a strong disagreement between US and Japan. US scientists were not convinced of the importance of site effect. They thought it was changing a lot from an earthquake to another. Japanese researchers thought it was important. So they decided to work together through a working group, the ESG working group, which was common between the International Association of Earthquake Engineering and International Association of Seismology and Physics of the Earth's Interior. So the best way to reconcile the different viewpoints was thought to be through experiments on test sites. So that was a lesson for me to see how you can go back to the data, because by that time I was only a numerical modeler, and see who is right. So the picture here is showing on the field in California for one of the test sites that was designed for that. So the next step after having test site was to organize conferences with benchmarks to compare prediction and observation on twin observation from a Californian site on Turkey Flat in central California and Odawara Valley in Japan. And I think this experience was very important for me because it shaped a lot of my later research. I saw that we could learn good and bad things from this test site. The bad thing was that even simple computer codes do not provide the same result depending on who is running them. So one of the lessons was the importance of test sites. So in my later career, we tried with some European colleagues to set up test site in Europe, in Greece, in eastern Greece at Eurosite and eastern Greece at Argostoli later. And also we had a lot of benchmarking exercises to compare the method, the numerical methods or data processing techniques and the actual data. So we had several such benchmarking exercises. First one was for a workshop similar to the Odara ESG 92-1. It was held in Grenoble. Then we had several benchmarks, which was partly sponsored in France by the nuclear industry, who is interested in these questions. And it's going on, and right now we are preparing the 7th edition of this symposium on effect of surface geology on ground motion. It will be in 2026 in Grenoble, and it will be organized by one of my former students, Cécile Cornou, and we'll have a benchmarking exercise on the effect of topography, and the name of this benchmark is Bento. So we had also various exchanges, especially in the 90s, and most often these exchanges were Japan funded, so again a debt. and we were addressing different topics: the use of noise, the use of weak motion recording with the empirical accuracy function, and also the use of numerical simulation. I will not detail all these things, but it was very rich exchanges. So we had, this is an example of lunchtime during one of these meetings in Grenoble. And we had also some other, addressing other topics. We visited a bungee jumping bridge. We went in a cave, and we had also some time in the cafe. Okay. One thing I learned a lot from Japan was about how to use noise. What is noise, seismic noise? And I learned the difference between microtremors and microseism, which was not so clear in Europe or even in the US by that time. And actually, this was launched by a method that was proposed by a Japanese engineer, Yutaka Nakamura, based on the H over V method. So it was so simple, this method, that it spread all over the world at almost the speed of light, and it provided intriguing results, but the explanation originally provided by Nakamura was not so physically or mathematically convincing. So we first started in the early 90s to have some artisanal research with tests on the experimental approach. We had a numerical simulation approach. And this was the occasion for me to dive into the Japanese scientific literature, at least the one that was available in English. And this led me to the review paper at the ESG 98 in Yokohama. And then we've tried to organize and harmonize our effort in Europe through a European project, which was a Sesame project, who was dedicated to the understanding what is behind this H over method, and also what is behind the array microtremor measurements and what could be done with that. It was quite popular in Japan by that time, but in Europe or in the US, it was not used at all. So we learned how to use it, and we learned it was a very useful tool. And it's still ongoing. Now array methods are becoming a routine survey tool also in Europe, thanks to various initiatives. But it took about, I would say, 2 decades at least to transfer the applicability of these methods from the academic field in Europe to the engineering field. And it's still ongoing with further research on the discrete, on the diffuse wave field assumption, and also the spectral ratio approach for ratio. I don't have time to develop. And another example from Japan was about the way to manage strong motion networks. When I came back from California in the late 80s, there was no strong motion network in France, so we tried to take the California network as a model, and we made a strong push in France to get an academic strong motion network. It took 5 to 6 years to convince the administration, and we finally succeeded. And then there was a Kobe earthquake, and just after that there was the development of the KNet and KICnet network, which were a new generation of networks with not only a large number of instruments, but also a very rich metadata for each station with information on the geology and on the velocity profile for each instrument. So we are just trying now to 20 or to 30 years later to mimic what was done in Japan by that time, that is to have this velocity profile on each of our instrument in France. And similar efforts are being done at the European level, and it's clear that this kind of new networks was an example for the French and European first strong motion community, but later the whole seismological community. And these networks and the data it gathered, and which were freely available, offered many scientific opportunities to investigate several topics. First, the first topic that we investigated was to design the shape of the regulatory spectra for the building code in France. So it was done on the basis of the first KNet and KICnet data, and it led to a result which was strange by the time, that is the response spectra were quite rich in high frequency. And actually, that was now it's confirmed. It's because the data are well, the data are very good. Also, the fact that there is a very rich set of metadata around the accelerometric recordings allowed to develop some new kind of ground motion prediction equation with earlier version of intelligent artificial using neural networks. So it helped to derive prediction equation without any a priori functional form. Also, it allowed to perform an objective assessment of the performance of various types of site indicators to explaining site effects. So from the US, everybody is trying to use only the VS30, very shallow information, the average velocity of the on the top 30 meters, but from Japanese data set, it's possible to go beyond that, and it was possible to investigate the performance of various proxies and to show that VS30 is not by far the ultimate one or the best one. Also, there was a big debate in France and Western Europe, and also in the US in the late 2000, early 2010s about the ground motion on very hard rock, because there are many nuclear power plants which are on thick sediments, and below these thick sediments there is a very hard bedrock for which we have very few recordings. So the question was how to extrapolate the rock motion from standard rock, velocity around 1,000 meters per second, to very hard rock, velocity beyond 2 kilometers per second. And by that time, there was a belief in the Western world that the motion on very hard rock was larger than on soft rock in the high frequency range because of very small attenuation, the kappa parameter. And thanks to the KICnet dataset, it was possible to show the opposite, and it took about 1 decade to convince the engineers that this assumption was strong, this belief was strong. And also the KNet and KICnet data were an opportunity to study the nonlinear effects. So I as I told you, I have no time to detail that. The only thing I will detail is about the issue of site-city interaction, which may be called also urban effects. So that will be my second part of my talk. No, I will skip that. It's about the hard rock. The main lesson from this 4-decade back look to these exchanges between France and Japan, well, factually, about 1/4 to 1/3 of my scientific production is directly or indirectly a consequence of those exchanges. It's much larger than those which are US inspired, and it shaped many of my own projects in France and Europe. And it had also more immaterial impact. First, the professional attitude I could discover in our Japanese colleagues were very hard work. I remember the first time one of the first time I came to Kojiro's lab here, there was a mattress and some students were sleeping in the lab. So hardworking, very high quality data with rich metadata, and also a very rapid reactivity as shown by the installation of the KNet and KICnet network only in a few years after the Kobe event. And also the human attitude. I enjoyed the respect, the attentiveness, the quietness, the humility, the modesty of all our Japanese colleagues, and I learned a lot from that. You know that in the Western world, we, especially in the US and in France, we may become very arrogant very easily, and that was a remedy. That was very useful for me to benefit from this example. Okay, so now the second part. It's my 4-decade quest for site-city interaction. So I will start with explaining the initial motivation based on the observation in Mexico City in 1985. I will then present an overview of various kind of investigation on soil structure interaction, soil structure interaction, and site-city interaction, a kind of global interaction over the last 4 decades, and the results of my investigation on the KNet and KICnet data in the Tokyo-Kanto area, which I did last year. So the address issue is that, suppose you have a city resting on sediments with a quite dense urbanization. So if you are a seismologist, you are going to be interested only in the effect of sediments, the amplification of effect of sediments, and if you remove the buildings. If you are an engineer, you ask a seismologist to give you the ground motion at the top of the sediments, and you will see the effect of this shaking at the base of when you excite your building with that, only one single building. And the question is, may there be some interaction between the building motion and the ground motion when the urbanization is very dense? And the initial motivation for that was in Mexico City. So Mexico City is a very densely urbanized area on a very soft soil, lacustrine clay. And during the 1985 event, there was many distractions, a few recordings only by that time. And what the few recordings showed that there was a very large spatial variability of the ground motion over a short distance, and the ground motion inside the lake zone was exhibiting a beating aspect, which is similar to what you can observe in building motion, because you have interaction between different closed frequencies. So it was difficult to explain by the time the length of the duration and the amplitude of the acceleration in the lakebed zone. That's the bottom trace that you see there. And so it came to my mind that it could be linked to some kind of soil structure interaction effect. But it was just an idea without any solid grounds. Well, among the other intriguing observation, which came later, there is the extreme spatial variability of building damage over very short distances within ensemble of similar buildings. So here you have a number of pictures from several earthquakes in the Mediterranean zone, and also the last row is from Chichi in Taiwan, where you have buildings which look similar, which are very close to one another. One is destroyed or heavily damaged, and the other are not. So this could come from default in the structure. But the question is, could it be due to some interaction and higher ground motion for one single building? On the other side, I had been looking at the recordings of earthquake in building when I was in California, and from all the building where it was possible to do so, to investigate the amount of rocking motion in the building motion, it was, I saw that in almost all cases, the rocking motion is contributing for more than 30 to 40% of the total building motion. So that means that the soil structure interaction is quite large. So, could this varying damage be due to some kind of complex building-to-building interaction through the soil? So that was a question. So, how we did that? So, we had a few mechanical models, a few experiments. I'm going to detail that. Well, soil structure interaction has been known for a very long time by engineers for the motion of the building. They know that if the same building is founded on a rock or on a soft soil, it will not behave the same way. The frequency will be shifted to a lower frequency if the soil is soft. By that time, there was no publication, or very, very few, on the effect on the feedback of the building onto the ground motion. If there is some dissipation of energy through the soil for the building motion, this energy should go back into the soil in some way. So there was a number of pioneering experiment for single building. The first one was on Millikan Library, which was shaken, and the motion of the building was recorded outside of the building up to several tens of kilometers. There was also some kind of serendipitous observation during the re-entry into atmosphere of the Columbia Space Shuttle. That was a paper by the first awardee of this award, Hiro Kanamori. And there was also some recordings of the terrorist attacks in Manhattan in September 11, 2001, a few tens of kilometers from Manhattan. You could see the impact of the plane. You can see the big records corresponds to the collapse of the Twin Towers, but the first one, which are circled on the top, correspond to the impact of the building, recorded several tens of kilometers of the Manhattan. So it means that the building motion is transmitted through the soil and then can propagate at large distance, even though in Manhattan the soil is not a soft soil, it's rock. So we started to have a dedicated experiment. One was in the test site we established in close to Thessaloniki in Greece. We had a model building at a scale 1/3, and we had pull-out tests as shown on the figure on the right, and we could see that when the building is moving, well, if you put some instrument at some distance from the base of the building on the ground, you can see the vibration of the building up to several tens of meters. Of course, the amplitude is decaying, but it was possible to reproduce this observation, which are in black. It was possible to reproduce with some numerical simulation in red, with some very simple model of impedance function for coupling the foundation of the building with the soil. And it was possible to do some numerical simulation also, showing that waves are propagating from the foundation inside the soil and are trapped as surface waves, as you can see here. And this model, which was quite simple, was applied to the Mexico City area, considering all buildings around the place, which is a CO56 station, which is in the circle over there, considering all the big buildings within a radius of several hundred meters, and considering these buildings as a single degree of freedom oscillator, which radiate wave into the soil, it was possible to show that with this simple single scattering model, we can change the ground motion from the one-dimensional resonance, the blue curve below, to a more complex amplification function, the red one, which is closer to the observation. So this was the first application to Colonia Roma in Mexico City by Philippe Guéguin. But this was similar to single scattering. There was no interaction, building-to-building interaction. So the next step in studies was to consider multiple interaction with numerical simulation first, and you see that the wave field at some frequencies is depending on the number of the building at the surface. So we had several simplified 2D models with a valley for the soil, with a periodic set of buildings for the city, as you can see on the right. And we did a parameter study, changing the thickness of the soil so as to vary the fundamental frequency. In some cases, it is the same as the building frequency, which is the building frequency is 2 Hertz. So in some cases, we have the same soil, the soil and building frequency coincide. In some other, it does not. And we change also the density of the building by putting a different number of buildings on the same central area. And doing that, so we could see the following. So you have 2 rows here. The first one is with a low density of building, 10 only. The upper row is with a large density, 33 buildings over the same area. And what is compared here is the motion of the building when the building is single, the red case, and when you have 10 on the bottom or 33 buildings on the top. And you see that it changes significantly the motion of the top of the building by reducing it and also complexifying it. And this was in the in-plane case, out-of-plane case. In the in-plane case, it's the same. So and when considering the motion in between buildings, that is the ground motion in the urbanized area, when there is a high density of buildings and when the building and soil frequency do coincide, that is the case on the left, well, there is a decrease of surface ground motion between buildings because of destructive interference between direct and back radiated waves from the foundation of the building. And this perturbation associated to the radiated wave field increase with increasing density of buildings, and they are maximum when the soil and building frequencies coincide. So these are numerical simulations. It was applied also by some colleagues in Paris to the same area in Colonia Roma in Mexico City, and they found the same thing. The bottom plot shows the ratio of the ground motion inside the built area when you have buildings divided by the case when you have no buildings. And you see that the average curve, the black one, is below 1. That is the average. There is an average reduction of the ground motion in the built area due to this multiple interaction and interference. Well, there was a number of other applications by other teams in other parts of the world. All these studies have the same conclusion, that the mean ground motion is decreasing within the urbanized area, and there is an increased spatial variability. The variability is given by the yellow area, which shows +1 minus standard deviation within the urbanized area of the ground motion. There was also a number of mathematical and mechanical models based on homogenization theory, but all led to the same qualitative results, and it allowed to identify a few adimensional parameters, which are the urban density. The larger the urban density, the larger this interaction effect, the mass of the building, and also the coincidence between soil and building frequencies, this effective maximum when the two coincide. Okay, this was from numerical simulation. And there were also a few observations in the lab on reduced scale in centrifuge in Nantes, in France, on a shaking table in Bristol, in UK, and also on acoustic analogs in the lab. And there were also some field experiments on, I would say, full-scale analogs, which are forests and wind turbine farms. There is a paper which was issued very recently by Marco Pilz. So the results from the laboratory scale is that buildings do interact through the soil, and the effect is to split the resonance peak of building into several peaks, as shown previously in the numerical simulation, and you see some beating in the recordings, and on the ground motion there is again an average decrease, an increase in spatial variability, a split in the resonance peaks of the soil, and a beating of records. From the field experiment on full-scale analogs, when there is a high density, when you make an experiment in forests, when actually you block it's shown that you block the propagation of Rayleigh waves. But this is linked with the longitudinal frequency of the trees. So it is quite different from the mechanism on the left. When considering wind turbine farms, this is a paper by Marco Pilz, well, the density of these wind turbine farms is much lower, and the effect is different. It's getting closer to the effect observed on the left, but as the density is quite low and the wind turbine farms are not so massive, the effects are limited. But up to recently, there was no real-world in-situ experiment in real full-size cities because it's quite difficult. And so I will skip that. This is one example of centrifuge modeling. If you put a single building and you knock it in the interest of centrifuge is that you can, by increasing the gravity, you can increase the scale. So in 1 meter, if you turn it at 100 G, it's like a soil sample of 100 meter length. So if you put a model building on that, you have on the left its free response when it is alone. And when you put 2 buildings in the centrifuge, and at the 2 positions that are shown here, the fixed building is in gray, and the additional one is in green. If you put a building at the green place and you record the motion of the first building when you excite him with a kind of pull-out test, well, you see the single building response is the same. There is no interaction between the 2 buildings. But when you put them at closer distance, here it corresponds to a few meters in real world, you see some beating. That means that there is some interaction. And when you reduce this distance for the red place, there is a stronger beating, so they interact much more. And the other result was the same. On shaking table, it's the same. I could show it later. I will skip that also. And move to the analysis of Japanese data, which I call the Tokyo case study. So the data are the KNet and KICnet and JMA data recorded in the 4 main prefectures of the Tokyo urban area, that is Tokyo, Chiba, Kanagawa, and Saitama. And there are also 20 JMA stations in this area. So the basic data are the side terms that were obtained by Hiroshi Kawase and Kenichi Nakano after a generalized inversion of all the KICnet and KNet data and JMA data. And you see on the right an example of this side term for a given site. The average is in red, and the gray area is the variability from one event to another. Hiroshi and Kenichi provided me the side term for each event in the whole Kanto area over the frequency range 0.2 to 20 hertz, as you can see here. And then this is about 150 sites. I selected only those sites for which there were more than 10 years of continuous recording to see some changes with time. So you see, it removes a number of stations, including, in particular, all the JMA stations that were installed quite late. So we are left with about 100 sites, which in average have recorded about 130 events. It varies from one station to station, but over 20 years. So it's possible to look for any change in the site response at all these stations. So this was done. First in a qualitative way, looking at the average site terms in different time periods. You see on the right for periods which are about 5 years each, where the different colors correspond to different period, and knowing the number of events you have over which period, you can investigate whether the change from one period to another is statistically significant or not. This is what is shown on the bottom plot. The probability to have the same average site response is given by all these curves as a function of frequency. And you see at low frequency, the probability is getting quite low, but at high frequency, the probability is quite high. That means that there is no significant change. And quantitatively, for each site and event, we average the site term in different frequency band, 11 frequency band, which are shown on the top right plot. And I will show an example for one of these frequency band between 3 and 5 hertz. And you see as a function of time below, the average amplification in these 3 to 5 hertz band for all the events that have been recorded. And you see that in this case, there is no particular trend for a change with time. So the change can be quantified by a correlation coefficient between the time and the amplification value, and also by the slope of this curve. If there is any change, there will be a slope up or down, and it can be characterized by the evolution over 20 years, which I call the ratio R20Y. Okay, so in this side there is no change. This is another site where you have the same processing, and what you see that the red curve is below the green one and the black and blue one. So that means that the low frequency site response is, that it means that the recent site response is lower than the older site response. And when looking at different frequency band, you can see here that there is a slope and that the amplification, there is a trend for amplification to decrease. So this can be quantified for each frequency band by the correlation coefficient with time, and the 20-year trend R20Y. So they are shown here as a function of frequency. You see that this reduction coefficient R21 is significantly lower than 1. It's below 0.5, so that means there is a reduction factor higher than 2 over the whole frequency range, and the correlation factor is negative, so it's decreasing, and it's quite significant. It's below minus 0.5, so that means that this change is significant in this case. And there are some other stations, and you see the probability that the average are the same is very low, so there is, this change is statistically significant. This is another stations where you see there is a change only in the low frequency band, but not in the high frequency band. And the change, again, in the low frequency band is a decrease by a factor larger than 2. So, putting all this together, when looking at the location of station with significant changes, first looking at the low frequency band below 1 hertz. So, if you make a statistics on all stations of the Kanto area, there are no significant changes for 91 out of the 106 stations for which it's possible to do this analysis. So there is a very low correlation with time, and the decrease factor is very close to 1. There is no decrease. But for 12 of them, maybe 15, the reduction factor is significant, and the correlation factor is significant also. So there are 3 stations for which the reduction over 20 years is larger than a factor of 3. There are 5 stations for which it's between 2.5 and 3, and 4 stations for which it's between 2 and 2.5. And there are 3 stations for which it's below 1.6 and 2, but the correlation values are very low, so it may be, it's maybe not significant. But at least there are a number of stations for which there is a statistically meaningful change over the 20 years. And there are no stations with an increase over the same period. And if you look at the high frequency range between 2 and 10 hertz, well, at almost all stations there is no change. There might be one station for which there is an increase, a decrease, a high frequency decrease of factor 2.5 to 3, and that's it. The next is to see where these stations are located, where the station where there are changes are located. So this is the whole Kanto area. The stations where there are some changes are only in downtown Tokyo, on the square, the white square on the right plot. And this is a zoom. And in red, you have the station with the largest decrease, beyond 3. In orange, intermediate decrease, 2.5 to 3. Yellow, 2 to 2.5. And cyan, light blue, is between 1.6 and 2. It may be statistically not meaningful. And the white one are those for which there is no change. So out of all the stations in the Kanto area, it's possible to see some change only in these stations, in the low frequency range only. So the next question, and I will have finished soon, is can these changes be related to the urban development? So here you have the urban changes in the 1996-2018 period, with a number of new buildings per 5 years, from 1970 to 2020. And you see that there is a lot of construction in the Tokyo area in the 2000, between 2000 and 2010, with a large number of high-rise buildings built in this period. And the different curves correspond to different height intervals for the building. And the location of these buildings in the Tokyo, in the Kanto area, are mainly in the red area, which was the area for urban renaissance urgent development plan, where you have a lot of new buildings. So there has been a transformation of Tokyo in the same period, and now comparing. These are the location of the buildings with a height higher than 100 meters in the Tokyo area. 570 buildings on the right, on the left, 240 buildings on the right with a height larger than 150 meters. You see where they are located. And here is the map I showed you just previously, with the location of the sites where you have a decrease in site amplification, which are on the left part of this insert here. So it's in the part where you have a lot of new buildings. So there is a coincidence, and the question is, can we conclude that there is a site-city interaction in Tokyo, in downtown Tokyo, or not? So there are some intriguing trends of a time-changing site response at some sites, which apparently are spatially correlated with the area which has been redeveloped recently with a lot of new high-rise buildings. So there are several potential explanations outside of site-city interaction. One might be the fact that you are adding a lot of mass, and this may consolidate the soil and increase the soil stiffness, so decrease the site amplification. You can have also, with such high-rise buildings, a kind of blocking effect for the propagation of surface waves, as is observed in the lab and in the forests. I didn't have time to show the result, but it showed the blocking of Rayleigh waves. There might be also a sensitivity of site effects to back-azimuth, distance, depth, and if there is an unequal distribution of hypocenters with time, this may be related. It's to be investigated. There might be some other explanation, and any suggestion is welcome. So, what are the further checks to better identify the right explanation? First, for the explanation in terms of consolidation, I was given recently the reference of the data bank for geotechnical data, so, which are shown here. So it may be seen if there is a consolidation over time in the Tokyo area, in this particular area of Tokyo, looking at settlement data, maybe looking also at travel times from one building to another through cross-correlation over time from coda waves, seeing if the velocity of S wave is increasing with time. And also it could be checked with numerical simulation. How much do you need to increase the velocity and over which depth to get a reduction by, in amplification by a factor of 2 to 3, but only in the low frequency range, not in the high frequency range. This should be done. Whether it's site-city interaction or surface wave blocking, we should perform the same kind of analysis. I forgot to tell you that the site term I have been using are those which are derived from the whole length signal, that is including surface wave. If we look only at surface wave, at S wave, the site term is lower, and we should check whether we see a similar change in site term for S wave only or not. To look at the sensitivity explanation in terms of sensitivity to back-azimuth, distance and depth, we should look at the evolution of hypocenter location with time for the data that are available in this data set. So it has yet to be done. And there are also some further work to check the site-city interaction interpretation using a new set of data going until 2023 or 2024. This will allow to have more stations, including the JMS station, which are a little bit to the west of the area where we have this identified this site response reduction. We could also detail the time change. Here I took only a linear slope we could look some more abrupt change and also look for some quantitative measure of urbanistic change in the area to compare with the time changes of site response. We could look also at other types of site response, standard spectral ratio, but we have to choose a reference. Borehole kicknet recordings, but there are too few in the considered area. H over V maybe, and event and site corrected residual in ground motion prediction equations. So there is a lot of work to be done. Also looking at other types of geophysical monitoring, that is, for instance, cross-correlation, or other dense and developing urban areas in Japan or elsewhere in the world. But I doubt there are many areas where there are many instruments also. So I'm done. And there are many reasons with that for continuing to benefit from the cooperation with Japanese seismologists. So I will finish here with this view of Grenoble. And so there are many reasons, despite my age, which is growing. And I want to finish by expressing again my very sincere and multiple thanks for your patience now, your kindness, repeated invitation, long-term collaboration, high-quality data, and grateful congratulations also for all the Japanese seismology achievements with what you did in the last decades is tremendous and very useful for all seismologists of the world. And I will just finish with this slide, quoting some of collaborators in Europe and also in Japan. And these were pictures from Japan, but you can see pictures from France are not so, are quite nice also. So if you come and visit, you will be very welcome. And there are reasons to visit outside seismology. We don't have earthquakes in France, or only small ones, but nature is quite nice also. I don't know about people, but French have not a good reputation, but nature is nice. Thank you again very, very much for your patience. I exploded the time, sorry.